Welcome to Life After, a podcast for women to take you from feeling like you're just surviving to thriving, to creating a life you really love. Expect to discover tips and tricks to get there. Each episode will have actionable steps to empower you to make changes. I started this podcast because I've been through it all, from getting out of a marriage with a narcissist to completely rebuilding my life. And now I'm on a mission to help you too. You can change your life. It's absolutely possible. Welcome to season 4. Wow. I never thought I'd get to a season 4. This is my 71st episode. Most podcasts don't make it past 20. I feel so grateful for the ability to produce this podcast, and I thank all of you for listening. So, hey, I'm going to be making some changes this season to the format of the podcast and the episodes. The first, as you may have noticed, is that I didn't start with any quotes. That was intentional. As you know, I love my quotes. And so we're still going to have dedicated quotes for each episode that are relevant to the topic that we're talking about. They're just going to be in the show notes. By having them there, we'll be able to just jump right into each episode going forward. So I've made this decision and some other decisions about what the podcast formatting will look like. I've made them really recently, so it's going to take me a little time to put them into place. So bear with me. Just know that you might see a little bit of change over the course of the next couple of episodes. In this episode, we're going to talk about 2026 and what you can do to make it your best year ever. I've been doing a lot of planning and processing in the last couple of months. For those of you who might not know, and I'm not really sure if I've mentioned it on the podcast or not, but I left my job in late September, and I'm processing having to leave unwillingly. I did not leave my job willingly. And that takes time, that process, to really think about where you are and what you see as your life going forward. So in this case, for me, it's meant going more slowly to figure out what my next steps are going to be. It's not always obvious what to do next in our lives. That's a totally normal feeling. So if you're in the middle of a transition as well, any kind of transition, know two things. There are two things I know for certain. You are not alone. And what you're feeling is completely normal. So what I would suggest is to lean in. I find that when we resist change, it makes it harder to move through it. And the reality is the change is still going to happen, regardless of whether we lean in and accept it or we struggle and resist it. Change is inevitable, and it is happening all the time. Change is happening around us all the time. So lean in. See what leaning in, see how that helps move through it. Give that a chance. All right. So welcome to 2026. Has anyone else really felt ready for the start of the new year? I always really like that New Year's mark the possibility of a new beginning. Of course, not that we can't start new things at any other time of the year. We do that all the time, right? Because change is always happening around us. For me, though, there's just something about feeling the renewal of a new year that I find so refreshing. So what's up? What's next for you in 2026? Do you have a plan? Have you set goals? Do you have a dream that's going to come to fruition this year? Maybe finally come to fruition? How much time do you take to set your intentions for 2026? I do a lot of that, actually, which I'm sure is not a surprise to most of you. And generally, I start in about mid-December. So I've really got time to process and be reflective about it. And generally, starting in mid-December means I'm ready for the new year right at the beginning of January. I found this year, though, for the first time ever, I had more time. And so I really, really leaned into the exercises that I usually do, as well as picking up a few from people that I follow. And one of those elements that I saw a lot from people this year was the suggestion to do the exercise of looking at last year and figuring out what worked, as well as what didn't work. What worked well? What could have gone better? And I think there's some real helpfulness to that, to doing this exercise. It's a fantastic reminder to celebrate our accomplishments. And it's also helpful and can encourage us to be aware of the mistakes we made or the things we'd like to do differently so that we don't repeat them. In order to make that process, that exercise a little smoother, in terms of looking at what went well and what could have gone better, if you're ever going to include that in your year-round wrap-up, which you can be doing in early January, I highly recommend that you have a place that you're keeping track of your accomplishments and your wins as you go throughout the year, as well as the things you might want to improve. Because then doing that annual recap, whether you do it at the end of December or early January or really at any time, is a little less time consuming. And you've got that data more readily accessible. So you can put it in a spreadsheet. I have my workbook that I created for myself. Shout out to those people who are beta testing that workbook right now. I really appreciate you. You know who you are. I keep it in my workbook so that I can just flip back and be more easily connected to those things, those successes of the year. And it also, when you track things like that more actively, I think it also helps us to remember to keep top of mind those things that maybe we want to do differently. So that's just something to consider. I personally spent a lot of time over several weeks thinking about what I want 2026 to look like. And I have a really good friend who introduced this idea to me a couple of years ago to think of a word or a phrase that we want to use to kind of categorize what we want our new year to be. I have such a hard time doing this because I can never make up my mind about one thing I want to focus on or one thing I want to have be the theme of my year. So, in getting ready for this episode, it just came to me yesterday. I just decided. It came to me and I thought, "Oh, yep, that's it. That's my word for this year." And that word is ease. I love saying it. I just love saying it. Ease. It feels so lovely and easy. It is so common to make our lives feel harder than they are or harder than they need to be. Now, of course, you all know me well enough to know that this is not me saying that life isn't hard and life doesn't have challenges. And if you are in the thick of something difficult, please, that is not what I'm saying to you. That said, When you want to accomplish big dreams and goals, we often are under the mistaken impression that anything worth having comes from hard work. Anybody else heard that in their lifetime? It's not worth it if it's not hard. It's not worth it if you didn't have to work hard for it. And it just simply doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way. So, what's your word or phrase for 2026 going to be? It doesn't have to take you a lot of time like it did for me. Maybe just capture the very first thing you thought of when I asked the initial question. When I first said a minute ago about this idea that we can capture the essence of what we want our year to look like. What came up for you? And if it takes a little more time, that's okay too. We're often not going to go wrong by doing things intentionally. A few of the other questions or thoughts that I ran across in my year-end wrap-up that really resonated with me were, who will I be this year? This year, focus on the identity you want to build. And I liked this one too. The woman I'm becoming wouldn't tolerate this. And then base all of your life decisions off of that statement, off of that belief. Are you noticing a theme here? It's all about our identity. When we want to make a change, or even if we're in a transition that we didn't necessarily anticipate or want, knowing who we want to be, creating that level up or that next iteration of who we are, we've got to know or have an idea for what that new identity looks like. And I think that one of the things that we can do if we're uncertain, if we have an idea of what we want, we have an idea of who we want to become, and we don't know how to do that, there are some really fantastic examples in the world out there that you can follow and get more information around. So, a lot of the times people reference Oprah as someone who had nothing and grew into this empire, right? She's a great example, a big example of how we can make our dreams come true. So find someone either in your life that's closely connected to you, or you have access to in your everyday life, to lean into, that has that identity that you're reaching for, and lean into it. If you don't have someone that's close to you or that you can see and have access to, that create some mentorship from in your community, then you can always go to, this is one of, I suppose, the positives of social media, is we can follow people that have the identities that we would like to become, and get ideas for how to do that. So just keep that in mind. The thing is, in addition to learning, understanding who you want to become, and then learning how to do that, shifting our identity often means also shifting our habits. And that's part of what you're going to see when you follow someone or you're connected with someone who is already at the stage that you're at. Is part of that is you're going to see what their habits are and how they do what they do. For more on habits, I actually went back and looked at episodes. I know that there's been one or two episodes I've done that has included a lot around habits. Unfortunately, it was not clear in my titles. It's buried in the episode. So, know that I've talked about this topic, but for the sake of brevity, if any of you can ever imagine that I have brevity, you can check out the book Atomic Habits by James Clear, and it's a great place to start. I've also mentioned this In the past, I've connected the books Atomic Habits and the 12-Week Year by, I cannot remember his name right off the top of my head. The 12-Week Year. They, used in conjunction with each other, also are a great way to help you learn how to shift habits, create new habits, change old habits, that kind of thing. So check those out. For me, at least, I have often made things so much harder in my life than I needed to. Anyone else have that tendency to complicate things in a way that they absolutely don't need to be complicated? So as I really consider now 2026 to be my year of ease, what does that look like? Who do I become when I'm living with more ease? What about my life becomes easier? What are the things I do? And maybe more importantly, the things I don't do to create more ease in my life. So you can ask yourself these same questions with whatever word or phrase that you've chosen. You can just fill in the blank there. And this shift into a new identity might seem challenging or maybe even unnecessary. However, when we change, we become someone new, and our identity shifts along with that change. So I guess what I mean by that is, things are changing around us all the time, and so we're adapting to that. And if we look back at our lives, we can see how we're making micro shifts and micro changes all the time, which is changing who we are. It's changing our identity. What we're talking about here is doing that process more intentionally. So it's not so much deciding that our identity will shift, and more that we lean into it and more intentionally choose who we will become. I love that we have a choice. We can make a choice. We can lean in and become who we want to be. Now, in order to identify some of the steps that we'll take to make this change to a new identity, we need to ask ourselves that one all-important question: what do I want? What do I want? Sometimes that question is a lot harder than we think it is. For example, if you're healing from a toxic or narcissistic relationship, if you're still in a toxic or narcissistic relationship, sometimes we have no idea who we are or what we want. We've lost ourselves, and it takes time and energy and focus to get back to that better version of who we were before the abusive relationship. And remember, I want to be really clear about this. That relationship may not be specifically with a partner. It could be your boss or a coworker, a friend, someone you work with in the community and spend a lot of time with, or even a family member. Unfortunately, narcissists can be anywhere, and we might not realize the impact that they've had on us and how that impact shows us how we see ourselves or relate in the world. So when we're in a position of having trouble identifying what it is that we really want, especially if it's because of the relationships we've got, it can take more time to figure out. So be gentle with yourself. And if you're in this situation, you may need to take some interim steps. You can do that by asking some simple questions and then practicing. Practice. So instead of what do I want, and that feeling that question can feel really kind of 35,000 foot macro level. You can break it down so that it's more at a more micro level. So instead of what do I want to eat at this meal? What color do I prefer? How would I spend my time? You can just practice with these baby steps by giving the question more specificity. And it might seem like these questions are really elementary. Of course I know what I want to eat, what's my favorite color, how I want to spend my time, right? But do you? If a friend said to you, "Let's go out to dinner, where do you want to go?" Is your answer generally, "Oh, you decide"? Or do you say, "No, I want Mexican food. Let's go to the Mexican place in town"? What's your favorite color? Do you wear your favorite color? Do you decorate with your favorite color? Or do you lean into what other people want? And this one I found more than anything else signaled to me how much clarity I had, which was, how would you spend an afternoon all to yourself? If you have trouble answering that question, then I really invite you to start asking really specific what do I want questions, and then following through with the actions to answer them, right? Walk through a store. What colors are you drawn to, right? What's your style around color? Really practice. You can do so easily and inexpensively. The other thing is, this process, this practice is not about getting it right. There is nothing about this process that leans into, or that is affected by any perfectionism ever. We are human. We're never going to be perfect. And so whether it's our first time trying this or our 100th time trying it, there is no failure. There's just doing it and practicing and seeing what comes up. So I just wanted to be really clear about that. If you're in a situation where you're feeling constricted by this what do I want question. And even if you're not in a situation that has you feeling challenged about your view of yourself, how you see yourself, it still might take some intention to sort out what you want. And that's because we have a tendency to think that we have to know all the steps or the how to get what we want before we work towards getting what we want. And that's just absolutely false. We don't have to know all the steps. The process is not a direct linear from A to B, B to C, C to D, D to E. That's not how life works. No matter what, we all experience life's inevitable ups and downs. The key is in life is not to not have any challenges. The key is to manage them, set our expectations, and move through them more quickly and easily than we may have in the past. So if you're making conditions around what you want, you don't have to do that. You don't have to say, I can have what I want if this happens, or when this happens, I can try that. You can just start. You can simply just decide what it is you want and start. You don't have to have all the steps, which is so good, right? That's great news, because even if you did have all the steps, some of them are going to change. They're likely going to change along the way. So we do this process where we know we have that thing that we want. We take the next step. We look around, we evaluate, what does that next step mean? What went well? What could have happened better? And then you intentionally take the next step, the next action. And that's how we do this process when you're moving towards what you want. You you, you can you just simply don't have to know everything in advance. And you don't have to qualify your what do I want. And your what do I want can be big or small, right? If you dream big, have your what do I want to be big, right? Because the reality is what you decide you want is likely going to change as you're taking the steps to get there. And we have the freedom to change or hone what we want, especially as we're gathering that information as we take each individual step on the path towards it. We're going to realize that there are places we need or want to shift. So, we can find examples in this when, at work, right? We start a job with an intention and then we get more information about what the job looks like or who our coworkers are, or what the environment is. It could be, going to school. You think you're going to go, when I started school, I thought for sure I was going to be a business major, right? And then I very successfully was weeded out in accounting 202. And so then things changed, right? What do I want? I'm going to get a degree, but what degree that was and the steps I took to get there were different. For those of you out there that might not know this already, I'm not sure how much I've talked about this. It took me 3 times, I think maybe even 4, kind of 3.5, for me to get through graduate school. I started and stopped. I started the first time trying to prepare and stopped. I started the process the second time and stopped. I started graduate school, got 2 quarters into it, and had to stop because of the events that were taking place in my life. And then finally, years later, I never let go of this dream of getting a master's degree. And literally more than a decade later, I finally started and finished. So just know that those that the path is not linear. Always remember the path is not linear. And when we're clear about what we want, like me wanting to get getting a master's degree, going to graduate school, and we know the steps that we're going to start with to move towards it, our identity is inevitably going to start to shift as well. And we can help that shift by being more deliberate or purposeful while focusing on that next or future identity more intentionally, right? Because even when I started graduate school the last time, I really wasn't certain I could do it. That there wasn't, even if I desired it, that there wasn't going to be something so big that happened that would derail me yet again, right? And when we do it this way, when we have that clarity about what we want, when we're willing to start to take action and take some steps to move towards it, when we lean into how our identity is going to start to shift, and we're more deliberate and purposeful about coming into that future identity, right? Then you're coming at this change from more than one angle. And it's going to help you to feel like you've got more choice behind it, like you've got more foundation, you've got more certainty. With all of that in mind, I invite you to think about exactly what you want 2026 to look like. And then ask yourself, what do I want? And who am I becoming in that process? Or who do I want to become in that process? When you look at it in those terms, when you really look at it in those terms, you're going to have an amazing 2026, no matter what the answers to those questions are. It's also going to be a great year this year on the podcast. I'm planning for some fantastic content on narcissists, toxic relationships, toxic personalities, mindset, boundaries, and way more. So thanks for listening. This podcast is a valuable resource for anyone seeking to make meaningful changes in their life. I'm here to support you on your unique journey, offering guidance and encouragement every step of the way. There will be new episodes on the second and fourth Wednesday every month. Please follow on your favorite podcast platform so you don't miss any episodes. And also, please rate, share, like, subscribe, all the things. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode on what's coming for 2026. Remember, you have the choice. And if you ask yourself those important questions, what do I want and who am I becoming? You're going to have an amazing 2026. As we wrap up, here's the thing. I've made every mistake. I've literally been there and done that. It's one step at a time, and you'll get there. There's hope. You've got this. If you're struggling in a relationship and wondering if it might be controlling, you're not alone. Download my free PDF at locatecoaching.com/free gift to help you find clarity and confidence. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you soon.